entrepreneurs love talking about the business book that they're reading right now on social media in an effort to have communication with their audience and to show off what they're learning and what they can be learning too. But how much is too much when it comes to talking about those business books? Because we see some people doing some things that could potentially get you in some copyright infringement trouble. Let's talk to everybody's favorite entertainment and IP lawyer, Tony, to find out more.
My name is Tony Iliakostas. I'm an adjunct professor of entertainment law and IP at New York Law School, and I have an Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok account called the IP Professor that is dedicated to all things intellectual property.
As entrepreneurs, we love investing inside of our businesses by learning and educating ourselves. One of those ways is by reading business books. And something that people love to do is share the knowledge that they're gaining from these business books online, on live streams, in TikToks, and Instagram Reels, on YouTube pages. But we need to talk about the legal side of things. How much is too much when it comes to having conversations about what we're reading inside of business books, Tony?
So great question. And I think, unfortunately, this has been sort of the heart of a dispute in the copyright space, because I think, sadly, in the context of copyright law, especially with something like this, what has become genuinely an objective question has now shifted to it being purely subjective. So, and this is thanks to case law, this is thanks to statutory changes in copyright law and so on and so forth. But let's start at the heart of it, right? So, at the start, when you're reading a business books are no different than nonfiction books or fiction books or anything of that sort, because they all qualify as a work of authorship fixed in a tangible medium of expression, aka a copyright. So those business books that are written by financiers or former investment bankers or former hedge fund people or business coaches, whoever, those, whatever they write from chapter 1 to chapter 10 or 15 or 50, whatever, those are copyrighted materials. Those will satisfy the definition of copyrights. And so again, we've really milked this to death, but probably by now, it's probably tattooed on your forearm, but by now that once you've created a copyrighted work, there are rights that come with the creation of that copyrighted work. And so it could be with the individual author, especially if they self-publish, or it could be with the publisher if they work with the publishing house, or it could be co-owned with the publisher and the author. So it's basically up for debate as to who could be the copyright owner. Either way, there is a copyright owner with that book, and there are rights that come with it, like the reproduction right, the right to create derivative works, the right to publicly perform it, the right to publicly display, so on and so forth. They're all enumerated in 17 U.S.C. 106 of the Copyright Act. Now, when you read a book line by line, chapter by chapter, especially if you're breaking it up into chunks, like a series of different lives or a series of different reels or TikToks or other videos, now the question becomes, is your reading of each line of each chapter going to satisfy the prongs of copyright infringement? Copyright infringement requires a valid copyright, aka you've created an actual work of authorship fixed in a tangible medium of expression, and also you've registered that work in the Copyright Office. 2, you've satisfied, or you violated rather, one of those exclusive rights under copyright law. And then in addition, the infringer had access to the original copyrighted work, and what they're infringing on is substantially similar to the original work of authorship. So reading aloud is that substantial similarity prong being satisfied, and certainly going to the bookstore and buying the book, or going on Amazon and buying the book, there's your access prong satisfied right there. But now the question becomes, is reading those chapters going to satisfy the fair use defense under copyright law? And that's important to stress. I know we've talked about fair use loosely in previous videos, and you're more than welcome to check them out. We've talked about it a lot with KM. But in a nutshell, fair use is not a standalone category of IP. Fair use operates as a defense to copyright infringement. In fact, if you read the Copyright Act, it says that fair use is not an action of copyright infringement. It is not copyright infringement. So it's automatically letting you know that it's operating as a defense to those types of claims. But in order to satisfy the fair use defense, you have to ask yourself, are you doing this for criticism, commentary, news reporting, teaching, scholarship, or research? If it's for any of those reasons, then you could advance into the 4-factor test that lays out whether or not fair use has been satisfied. If it's not for any of those reasons, your fair use defense is going to fall flat on its face. So now let's humor ourselves. Let's say that, yes, let's say you're having a seminar, a weekly seminar with your followers on Instagram. You're doing an Instagram live, and you want to read a book from, let's say some money manager who's giving tips on how to invest wisely for your 401k, right? You read those chapters. You have a weekly IG live series where you're reading chapters and you're providing commentary, you're providing, some type of supplemental information. Okay, fine. You've satisfied that commentary prong. But now the problem becomes under the 4-factor test for fair use. One of those factors is the amount and substantiality of your use of the copyrighted work in proportion to the overall work. What that's essentially trying to determine is how much of that original work of authorship are you using in your work. And the problem is, if you're reading each line of each chapter, you're going to end up racking it up from 10% to 20% to 50% to 75 to you reading 100% of that book out there in the public, and nobody ever had to buy a book. They could watch the replay on somebody's Instagram. So now it lives in perpetuity on those platforms. That to me seems to satisfy it's not a satisfaction of that prong, and therefore that could be ripe for a copyright infringement lawsuit right there. It's not going to satisfy fair use. And I want to just address very briefly, there's a Supreme Court case that kind of helped allude to this, Zucchini versus Scripps Howard Broadcasting, if I'm not mistaken. That lawsuit dealt with basically the fair use test, and it assessed that if you're using even just the heart of something, that's enough to then qualify that you're using the totality of the project. So if you think of Oh Pretty Woman, you think of that bass riff, do 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 do. That's the heart of the project. If you were to watch, the 1980 Miracle on Ice at Lake Placid Olympics, when Al Michaels says, "Do you believe in miracles?" Yes, that's the heart of the sports broadcast. Get in the choppa, or get down. Any Arnold movie where there's that iconic line, that's the heart of the film. And that's essentially the same thing we need to ask ourselves in a fact pattern like this. Where is the heart of your reading of these types of business books? If it's those 5 steps to getting a good solid 401k Roth IRA, oh no, that's the heart of the project or the copyrighted work right there. So as you can see, there are a lot of layers, a lot that is unpacked just from this one fact pattern. So I think in a nutshell, be wary of these types of situations where you're reading these books, because honestly, it's no different than if you were to take one of KM's books. Let's say you're reading The Conspiracy of Jack Frost. They keep promoting the hell out of that book. But if you read that book in Instagram or TikTok Live, and you're reading each page, each line, that is just as much of a copyright infringement as you reading each line from a money manager's book or any of these other business books out there to your audience.
So we want to make sure that as we are learning from these business books, we are definitely not reading line by line, actually giving the communication of everything that's inside of these books. We also want to point out that it really is about the heart of the content. And so one of the things that we see a lot, Tony, is that people will go and do a chapter by chapter assessment of these business books and give a bullet point list of everything that happens inside of those chapters. And based on what you've just said, that is the heart of the business book, and that can also be copyright infringement. So what advice do you have for somebody who does want to talk a little bit about the books that they're reading, specifically the business books, to make sure that they are communicating and showing their interest in these stories or in these books without infringing on the person's copyright?
I think it all begins and ends with you not reading the book line by line, but instead offering a thoughtful analysis on your own. I think the beauty of being a human being is we're all capable of thought, right? So it doesn't hurt to just finish reading your book and then sitting down with pen to paper, or opening up a laptop, opening up, a notes app or something, and just having a free-flowing thought process of what were your takeaways, what did you think the book achieved, where do you think the book was lacking, and sharing that input is going to be just as valuable as anything else. And I think your audience members would value that immensely. I think reading the book, yes, could be helpful because they're hearing and reading the same things that you are. But think about the author. Think about what disadvantage they're suffering. They're not getting royalties off of you doing a live recitation of that book reading. None at all. In fact, yes, you may be giving them free PR, but it's not great free PR. It's not the kind of free PR that any author is necessarily looking for. So I think it's all going to boil down to just being mindful of other people's rights. And again, you can provide your own assessment and your own analysis. Yeah, you can make a reference from like a line or two from the book. I don't think that that's valid enough to warrant a copyright infringement lawsuit. But if you're just blatantly abusing that, then that's when it becomes problematic. If you have intentions of reading the book in its entirety, then that's where you probably have to go to the publisher, ask for permission, get the protocols of like, what parameters or what am I within my right to do with this book. And that's where the publisher at their discretion is going to decide what you can or cannot do in terms of a live reading or even sharing any other information related to the book. So just, it's kind of thing where you have to be cautious and careful and be smart. That it's such a common sense thing to say and sad to say in this day and age, because I think we're all capable of thinking on our head and wisely, but it doesn't hurt. It doesn't hurt to just say it, especially in something like this, because, honestly, so think of all the effort, the hours, the time that went into writing that book. And now you reading it out loud on a YouTube video or an Instagram live, it's going to severely disadvantage that author.
And one thing that you can do if you're very excited about reading this business book and having these conversations is to go to the copyright holder, the publisher, the author, whomever is in charge here, and have a conversation with them to see what you can do. It may be worth it to actually form a conversational group of people who all purchase the book, and then you'll be able to, with permission, read it out loud, have those discussions in a closed forum so that you can still have that communication with people and build each other up because of it without infringing on anybody's copyright. If you have further questions on this, drop those down below. And as always, Tony is available for answering questions on his social platforms, where he is constantly dropping incredible knowledge to keep us legally protected in the entrepreneurial space. So Tony, where can everybody find you online?
You can find me on Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok at the IP Professor.
And because we know you want to be more profitable through your social media marketing endeavors, hit the subscribe and notification bell for daily videos helping you to learn how to navigate social media and stay legally protected in the entrepreneurial space. We have upcoming episodes with Tony ready to drop, but we're also answering your questions, so let us know down below what you need to know more about in the legal space. You can also drop your questions on how to navigate an online business, where we're bringing in guests and I'm giving you my expertise to help make sure that you are more profitable this year on your social platforms. We'll see you in the next episode.